Universal's Islands of Adventure might perhaps best be known for their flagship roller coaster in the Jurassic Park section of the park, Velocicoaster. However, long before it was built, the land was once home to a vastly different kind of attraction. It was a walkthrough experience where you could meet a real-life Triceratops. Now, I talked about this attraction years ago in a very poorly presented video, so today I wanted to take another look at this often forgotten attraction, one touted as a revolutionary showcase of animatronic technology, but also one that would later be left abandoned for nearly a decade, quietly rotting away within the active park. This is Universal's Triceratops Encounter. When Universal Studios Florida first opened in 1990, it set out to not only bring the iconic Universal Studios Hollywood experience to the Sunshine State, but to also compete with the growing theme park empire that Disney had been building. The complex they had down the interstate was a vast and sprawling world in comparison to Universal's singular park. But almost immediately after opening, that was all about to change. Universal had big plans for the Orlando complex, fast-tracking the development of a second gate, which first started out as a cartoon-based concept in 1981. 2 years later, that concept would grow into various other IPs, including close collaborator Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park, which had just released in theaters that year. The second gate would be formally announced in 1983, a part of a much larger overall master plan called Universal City. That second gate would ultimately become known as Islands of Adventure, and it would only be a small part of an overall complex with various new hotels, a golf course, expanded parking facilities, and a new entrance esplanade attached to a shopping district. The flagship park of this expansion would continue to evolve, like much of the master plan over the following years. Islands of Adventure would later grow into including 6 different distinct lands, though still heavily including a dedicated Jurassic Park area. This was meant to be the park's cornerstone land, and a revised version of the water raft ride already found in Universal Hollywood would become its marquee attraction. Early concepts for the land also included a suspended family coaster, a children's play camp, a Jeep safari attraction, and a helicopter tour ride, likely in the form of a simulator. While the latter 2 attractions were cut due to budget constraints, they were slated as possible expansion attractions post-opening, and they were even alluded to in a model in the queue of River Adventure, which is actually still there even today. Jurassic Park would also feature one other key attraction, that being what was known as Dinosaur Encounter. This was a walkthrough attraction based around the sick Triceratops scene from the 1993 film, bringing guests through a detailed queue and then having the opportunity to view a life-sized animatronic Triceratops aided by a live actor. While these concepts were being matured and locked in, the planned 1995 construction timeline would ultimately never happen. Instead, the park would be officially announced in 1997, with construction starting shortly after. Finally, in spring of 1999, Islands of Adventure would open to the public, and with it, Jurassic Park and the Triceratops Encounter. The final attraction was pretty close to the original concepts, with guests entering past a large Triceratops fossil marquee and winding through a very detailed queue. In story, guests would be touring behind the scenes of Jurassic Park's operations, since of course the land was supposed to be a functioning Jurassic Park, complete with a walk-around John Hammond. Once guests passed through the detailed field station, food compound, and research outpost, sometimes featuring a live actor interacting with the audience, guests would then be split into groups and brought into one of 3 paddock buildings. There they would meet live actors playing veterinarians, tending to a sedated 24-foot-long animatronic Triceratops. Kids would then be selected to touch the massive animatronics as the in-character actors would educate guests about the animal. And they did have a pretty decent range of motion and looked pretty impressive, complete with dilated eyeballs, stomping feet, and even the ability to urinate. Universal thought they were so lifelike that initially they were only referred to both behind the scenes and to the public as real-life animals. While technically and conceptually it was a pretty interesting attraction, right off the bat, there were issues. First off, these were impressive but complicated robotics. Interestingly, they were built by a Canadian aerospace company, the same one that built the robotic arm for the NASA space shuttle. At the time, they were some of the largest animatronics ever produced for a theme park, and required a lot of maintenance in both their inner workings, but also aspects like their lifelike skin, which was constantly being contorted and exposed to uncontrolled atmospheric conditions. Their daily operations were prone to constant e-stop shutdowns, which would cause the attraction to shut down completely, sometimes for long periods of time. This would then back up the queue, causing extended wait times, only for guests to have the animatronics shut down mid-show. But even when guests actually made it through the queue and into the paddocks, well, most left unimpressed. That's mainly because guests queued up for the attraction thinking it was more than what it was, expecting another thrilling dinosaur ride, and not a somewhat dry walkthrough exhibit. While it was cool for kids that were into dinosaurs, and even cool for some adults to get that close up and even touch a large animatronic like it, once you did it once, there really wasn't much value in re-rideability. This was all on top of employees not even being too thrilled to staff the attraction. Not only did they need to perform in front of guests, but they were also required to memorize an extensive book about Triceratops to come off as an expert, which one former employee told me was a ridiculous expectation for what were essentially minimum wage employees. Clearly there was an issue, as guest interest had toppled off following the park's opening. Universal knew it was a problem, and just 3 years after opening, the attraction was renamed to Triceratops Discovery Trail, now with a pretty obvious temporary sign over top the original. It was a name chosen that was now tempering guest expectations, but still, the problems persisted. Guests were still left unsatisfied, the animatronics continued to cause operational issues, and the park as a whole wasn't doing so great. Universal, as a result, was looking for budget cuts. Following its use in Halloween Horror Nights 2002, the walkthrough attraction was often shuttered for long periods of time. When capacity for the park was needed, they would reopen the attraction and guests would enter through the exits, skipping the long queue area. This continued on through the next few years, as the number of overall shows a day had been greatly reduced, and while exact dates are a little hard to determine, the attraction would operate on a seasonal basis through at least 2004. In fact, as a dinosaur-loving kid, I experienced it myself in 2003. For the rest of the time, a temporary closed sign would be put up at the entrance, while camouflage netting would cover the main marquee. By 2005, Triceratops Discovery Trail had failed to open, and by all indications, it was now closed for good. Years would pass with the attraction sitting abandoned and disused. The entrance would be blocked off, and any mentions of it would be removed from promotional material and the park map. Very little was documented from this time, but within, the massive 8-ton animatronics likely sat there abandoned in the dark. Sometimes the original marquee sign and parts of the queue would be used for photo ops, particularly with the baby Triceratops puppet. But really, that's it. While rumors circulated about a possible redevelopment for the land, there was hope for the future. With Universal well aware of the massive crowds the upcoming Wizarding World of Harry Potter Land would bring to the park, management knew they needed more capacity and things for people to do. Triceratops was a good candidate to bring back online, as the attraction was left as it was and just needed some overall maintenance. So, through early 2010, Universal would clean up the attraction, updating some guest-facing areas, and most importantly, perform critical maintenance on the animatronics, gearing it up for an imminent reopening. By December of that year, Triceratops Discovery Trail would reopen once again, now with a slightly reformatted show, but still funneling guests through the former exit and into the paddocks. Still though, guests weren't all that impressed with the 8-minute experience, now with even less effects and no interactivity. A spokesperson for Universal said that the attraction would only be temporary, and that the resort was now testing the experience with guests. Their conclusions were likely the same as they were in the early 2000s, but really it didn't matter. It was still a semi-cool experience that ate up massive crowds for the holidays. But since it was temporary, its reopening would be cut short, as it would close by January of 2011. After that point, it would only reopen a few times thereafter. By mid-2011, the attraction would close unceremoniously for the last time, unacknowledged by Universal that the experience was now closed forever. Since the attraction was situated in such a foliage-rich area of Jurassic Park, the now unmaintained guest areas began to succumb to the Florida weather. Perhaps right on theme of the Lost World, Triceratops Encounter's queue began to slowly fall apart. The lush jungle it was in now blanketed the pathways with leaves and foliage, while the props and vehicles lining it collected dust and grime. It was all a rather quick process of decay, and it was not that long after the attraction closed either. Adam the Woo and a few others captured this in mid-2012, showcasing the quick deterioration of the queue, but also the animatronics themselves. One left fully intact, another eerily missing its eyes, and the last partially broken down, missing its head. Without any indication from Universal of what the future may hold for the attraction, the quickly deteriorating site seemed to be a definite sign that nothing was happening here. Instead, everything was left as it was the day the attraction closed. Years would pass with little to no changes. Only a small portion of the former land was finally slated for some sort of reuse in 2015. By May, a portion of the former queue, just beyond the original Triceratops sign, was cleared out for the light construction of themed fences. The new experience was called Raptor Encounter, kind of the spiritual successor of the original attraction, just with a more thrilling, low-budget Velociraptor puppet. This time, it was a meet-and-greet/photo opportunity rather than an actual show. Guests seemed to really enjoy it though, many not knowing that beyond the thin tree line surrounding the area was a whole other abandoned attraction. By this point, the animatronic Triceratops had been removed and likely scrapped for parts and partially destroyed. One of the former paddocks had now been renovated for use as a staging area and employee break room for the Raptor Encounter. The other paddocks were just empty, ghostly rooms, now used for storage. This was while the rest of the attraction had now been taken over by foliage, with many props and structures beginning to succumb to the small jungle around it. In the background of all of this, there were rumblings of a new attraction coming to the Jurassic Park area at Islands of Adventure. As far back as June 2013, fans had circulated rumors of a potential roller coaster coming to the land, possibly slated to replace the abandoned Triceratops attraction. These rumors would escalate in 2018 when permits were filed that called for the demolition of the former site. Work would quickly begin later that year, and props which were found in the queue actually made their way to the Universal Prop Store in July, available for purchase for fans. Work walls would ultimately go up by January of 2019, along with leaks of a roller coaster track layout proposed for the site. Demolition would follow soon after, with buildings actually coming down in April and completely gone by May. Universal would officially announce its replacement over a year later in September of 2020, after much of the obvious roller coaster had already been constructed. Velocicoaster, as it was now called, officially opened to the public on June 10, 2021. The ride was an instant hit with both park guests and coaster enthusiasts, all praising it as a fantastic ride, one which brought an end to the very tumultuous story of the attraction's land it now dominantly occupied. Today, there is little evidence left of the Triceratops Encounter. The surrounding landscapes have dramatically changed with the new coaster, and even the former Triceratops bone marquee sign is long gone. Only a very subtle Easter egg can be found within Velocicoaster, a bag of Dino Chow which used to be found in the old attraction's queue. Other than that, Triceratops Encounter is now a forgotten attraction, one that even the park's designers knew was problematic from opening day. In a 2024 interview, original show producer for Jurassic Park, Bob Shreve, said, quote, "Triceratops Encounter was always plagued with technology issues. It was far too complex to exist in a theme park environment, and its replacement with a coaster was a good idea to revitalize the area." All in all, the attraction was only open for around 4 years full-time and a few short weeks of seasonal activity thereafter. That's pretty insane to think about. An attraction which likely cost millions in R&D and construction, one which showcased the very best in animatronic technology, all for it to never really work that well and subsequently sit abandoned for nearly a decade. I guess while it was a cool concept on paper, the actual execution just didn't connect with guests. And its ultimate closure and removal was an inevitability being discussed in forums as far back as 2002. While its ultimate loss isn't all that mourned by fans, a testament to how little was actually documented of this attraction, Universal never really let the idea die. In fact, its spiritual successor, the Raptor Encounter, was more akin to what guests actually wanted back when it opened, a more thrilling meet-and-greet opportunity. Even the Triceratops concept has been adapted elsewhere, like in Universal Hollywood and Japan, both having a walk-around Triceratops puppet, which have garnered tremendous guest praise. So really, while the infamous opening day attraction may now be long extinct, its legacy and concept lives on. I want to give a special thanks to Sam from Expedition Theme Park and Alicia from Theme Park Stop for their help in the making of this video. Both their links can be found in the description below. Of course, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Anyway guys, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.